My name is Jerry De Bruin, VP of Customer Success at Kimble Applications, and I will be your host today. Presenting today's webinar with me is our Director of Customer Success, Mike Corey. Today's webinar is the latest in our ongoing series that addresses how services-based businesses can scale through the key concepts of visibility, empowerment, and discipline. The previous webinars in our series have included managing financial adjustments in Kimble, maximizing your Kimble invoicing procedures, and Kimble proposal management. Today, we are pleased to demonstrate how the Kimble Change Management capabilities allow you to manage scope change as part of an existing engagement without clouding visibility of the original scope. But first, let's look at some housekeeping details before we start. We will be recording today's webinar. Everybody who has registered will receive an email with details on how to access the recording. In addition, even though all attendees are muted during the webinar, we welcome any questions that you might have. Simply type your questions in the box marked questions in the GoToWebinar console, and we will answer as many of those questions as time allows us towards the end of the webinar. And we will also follow up with each of you individually with responses to your questions. Let's look at the agenda. I'm going to talk about the benefits of having a well-thought-out process for managing scope change on in-flight engagements. Then, Mike will demo the Kimble Change Management functionality, focusing on two workflows. In the first workflow, Mike will create a change order that will be approved as part of the Salesforce approval workflow within the engagement. Then, Mike will create a change order that will be associated with an opportunity. One note about today's demo. Mike will be working in a 1.24 environment that's connected with Salesforce CRM, meaning he will be working with opportunities. We will explain the ramifications of that later in the presentation. I'm displaying the Kimble subway or tube map, and I put some special emphasis on this orange loop, which will follow whenever a change in project scope arises. Scope change inevitably brings up certain questions. Questions like, do I need a new change element for a scope change if it's this small? If I don't create a change element, will I lose visibility of changes to my baseline? Or will I need a new engagement to capture this change, or can I increase the scope of my existing engagement? Another question might be, how can I ensure that this change feeds back into my sales pipeline so my sales people or consultants get their bonuses? With Kimble Change Management, which was introduced in Kimble Release 1.22, you don't need to create a new engagement representing scope change or lose sight of the change by extending existing assignments without capturing the details. As you will see in Mike's demo, your project manager can choose from multiple options as they manage scope change. We are aware that some of our customers on the webinar today are using Kimble 1.21 and do not currently have access to utilize change management capabilities. For more information about the capabilities introduced in our latest release or the Kimble upgrade process, have your Kimble system administrator log a ticket with Kimble Support Desk or contact your Customer Success Manager. Let's take a step back. What is the goal of change management as part of project delivery? As the scope of an engagement changes, as situations arise where assignments need to be extended, or new milestones or deliverables are added, or a new unexpected piece of work arises, why not just get in there and extend and add and modify? That can certainly be quicker than waiting for an approval or for a new sales cycle. But taking the time to make sure change in scope is visible, approvable, and when appropriate, able to be fed back into the sales pipeline has both short and long-term benefits. Let's look at 5 of those benefits. Number 1, Change often comes at the demand of the customer. Keeping change elements distinct from the elements that were part of the original contract will give you a better idea of how to move forward with the customer from PO cover to further change request. Another benefit is change requires communication and visibility. If you have multiple people managing an engagement and even more people managing the account, it becomes important to not make a change without leaving behind a footprint. If the change is truly a simple extension of effort for one or more resources, Kimble provides a simple way of capturing the extension for audit purposes. Another benefit is change can give you important insights into your business. Down the line, you might see that you are consistently extending assignments by a predictable amount. It might make sense to begin forecasting for longer assignments. You might see that similar change requests are coming in from across different accounts. That might indicate the pre-sales gap. Number 4, change might be a critical factor in determining what people in your sales organization get paid. Just because an engagement has gone live, that does not mean your sales team bow out and forfeit on all commissions and bonuses related to change orders. In these cases, it becomes important to manage a change order as a unique sales opportunity while tracking the consequences of that change on the existing engagement. And last but not least, change is not always a sure thing. It's possible to find yourself in a competitive situation where you are bidding for additional work as part of an in-flight project, or perhaps trying to win the approval of a project sponsor for additional budget. The Kimble Change Management capabilities allow for the creation of a possible or probable change element on a firm engagement. Whether you go on to win or lose the bid for extra work, Kimble is aware of the potential change for resourcing and revenue forecasting purposes. Let's look at the change management decision tree. There are 4 distinct ways to handle change in scope. The Kimble Change Management capabilities provide you with the flexibility to model a scope change in a way that's appropriate for the context as opposed to a one-size-fits-all change approach. Before Mike begins his demo, let's quickly analyze our 4 options. When a change in scope comes through, you would first ask whether it requires a new element to set it apart. If it does not, and a note will be sufficient before changing an existing element, then you would make a narrative-only change. Once a narrative is captured about the scope change to be made, updates can be made directly to the existing assignment, milestones, or other revenue and cost-generating items. The narrative-only changes ensure that information about the change has been captured and is visible to the project team. But those changes are bundled in existing elements than rather being defined as part of a change element. Now, let's assume that a new element or a new set of elements is required to distinguish the scope change. You would ask whether approval or a sales process is needed for the change to be considered firm. If neither is required, then you can create a change element or set of change elements which will be immediately firm. However, if you don't want other factors to determine whether this element or elements can be considered firm, you will create a change order that will be used to control the change element's behavior. Once the change order is fulfilled and closed, the element will be firm. If you do not require this new element to go into the sales pipeline, then you would make the closing of this change order contingent upon approval workflow. In order to properly control changes on a project, many organizations will have governance in place to ensure change requests and are routed through the necessary approvals. Using standard Salesforce approval processing, a change order is routed through 1. or 2 levels of approval before change is considered firm. If this element does not get back into the sales pipeline, you will make the change order contingent upon winning the proposal or an opportunity. You will not have to make the decision. Your system will be configured to the appropriate setting. If you do not use sales opportunities, you will see acceptance of proposal. Saving this element would automatically create a proposal when, set to firm, would satisfy this change order. When Mike demos this in a moment, he will be using an environment that's connected with Salesforce CRM. So you will see an opportunity route. This involves a few more steps. The automatically created proposal will be associated with a new opportunity. When the opportunity is won, the change order is satisfied. With that, I'm going to hand over to Mike, who will show you what the Kimble application brings to the table for change management. Mike, please go ahead.
Thanks, Jerry, and thanks to everyone on the webinar for joining us today. So I'll be demonstrating 2 of the change management scenarios that Jerry outlined, one that requires approval and one that will be tied to an opportunity. For the first scenario, let's look at this internal finance review engagement that we've got. So we originally thought that this audit was for a primary business unit, although once we got started, the customer decided they wanted us to review another business unit as well. So we're going to need to add additional resource on this engagement for another 160 hours of work. Some things to consider as you think of the decision tree that Jerry showed us. We want to track the margin for this change separately. We'd also like the resource to book time to a separate assignment. In fact, we might even need to use a second resource to get this done in parallel with other effort. Given the amount of increased scope, we want to require an approval process internally for this change. Although since there's no additional sales commission and the client has already signed off on it, we don't need this in the sales pipeline via a new opportunity. So given all of those details, we'll need to handle this with more than just a simple narrative-only change. So navigating to the scope page for this particular engagement, we can leverage the existing primary BU finance review element and create a new change element directly from it. We'll add the additional 160 hours as a child to this primary business unit finance review. Note on this screen, this new change delivery element, we've got a few options here. The product, which I can change from the default, which is time and expense hourly. That's the same as the element that I'm creating it from, although I can pick a different product, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Obviously, we'll need to provide a meaningful name for this. And since I've kept the product the same as the original delivery element, I have an option which is displayed here for operated with primary. So we'll want to leverage this feature in those situations where the change element, this new element, would share operational configuration data and rules such as time categories, expense categories, and approval rules with the original element that's there. Or if you wanted this new change element to be recognized with the original element. The next choice that you have to make here, and again thinking back to the decision tree that Jerry showed you, is setting when this particular change is effective. And so as in certain scenarios, we may be able to create the new scenario without approval or without tying it to an opportunity or proposal. In those cases, we'd use the immediately only option, and the new element would be created straight away. As a side note, in 1.24, we have the ability to configure this so that the immediately option is not available to the user, forcing them to create a new change order as part of a change of this significance. In our scenario today, we're going to want to leverage the create a new change order as the option, so we'll select that here. You'll notice then that we get, once I selected the create a new change order option, I've got a couple new options that show up related to the event that will determine when this new change element can be considered firm. And as Jerry illustrated earlier, we have the option to designate that this new element will either be accepted by winning the associated opportunity or when the new change order itself has been approved. So in this first scenario that we're walking through, let's select approval of the change order as our accepted by option and then create the new element from there. So a quick look at the screen here, we see that this second element, this change element that we've created, is created as a child to the original. It's also, you'll notice that it is yellow. It is in a probable state. It's not yet firm because we've not yet won the particular change order. We've not approved the change order. So let's look at the change order itself. If we navigate to the change orders, we can see that its behavior is set based upon the approval of the change order, which would then activate the element. So let's come back to our scope screen, and let's further build out what the scope for this particular new element. Well, I can either leverage some functionality to extend assignments from the original element, or I can jump directly into this one and create a new assignment. So let's do that. And you'll notice the new activity assignment screen is very much familiar to what you're used to if you're using Kimble. We'll create the assignment for a specific resource, or we may want to leverage a generic resource with plans to staff this role at a later date. One perhaps noticeable difference here is this scoped with option, providing us with the ability to designate which particular element this assignment belongs to, in those cases where you've chosen the operated with primary setting. So let's continue creating the assignment for Paul Jones. And he's going to begin the beginning of July. And we've got our 160 hours. Taking us through into August. And now we've got our second assignment for Paul. If we jump back to our scope screen, we'll notice that we now have the related revenue and cost associated with that time and expense. Navigating to our dashboard, you'll also see that we have the secondary element created here as well with our projected revenue and cost. Notice that there's no baseline associated with it yet, and that it's still in a probable stage because we've not yet approved that change order. So let's take that step, and let's send that change order for approval. Now again, as Jerry mentioned, depending upon your organization's processes and your configuration, this could be sent for approval to one or potentially two approvers. For our configuration today, we've got it set up to quickly automatically approve, and we'll watch what happens from there. So the change order itself has been approved. If we navigate back to our engagement, we'll now see that we've got a baseline associated with this particular change element. Looking at the scope of our project, we'll also see that this particular change element is now firm and ready for us to work with. In fact, the last step would be for us to actually activate this particular element so our resource could begin capturing time and expense against it. So with this first scenario, we've demonstrated the simple creation of a new change element that was effective with the creation and approval of a change order. Remember, we needed the change order in this case and not simply a narrative, since that we had internal approval process to be completed before we commenced work on the project. So let's take a look at it in our next scenario. In this scenario, I'm going to create a change element that will be tied to a separate opportunity. In this case, it's because it's being sold through the sales team, and we want it to remain probable until we actually win the deal. So in this ERP implementation project, our client has decided that their internal resources are not available for report development, and they would like us to propose using our resources for that effort. So we'll go to the scope of our engagement. We're going to create a new change element as well. and we're going to add 30 days of time and materials based report development effort. And so this is a separate product, so we'll select time and expense daily. And notice that my operated with primary immediately disappeared. We're reviewing again when we want the change to be effective. We want to create a new change order. And we want it tied to the winning of an associated opportunity. So once I've set those, I can save the delivery element. Behind the scenes, it will create the proposal on the Kimble side. You see the second element that's here. Again, it's still a child to the original one. Now our next step is to actually create a new opportunity and move that through the sales cycle in order to complete the picture here. So let's look over at the opportunity. For simplicity, I've started creating this opportunity, have it filled out. I'm simply ready to save it. I'll save the opportunity. And in this particular case, Kimble will recognize for this particular account, for Acme, we already have potentially existing proposals related to change orders that we might want to leverage. So if I choose an existing proposal, I'll select that report development change request change order that we just created and click add. In creating the proposal before, Kimble will now go through the effort of creating the baseline information on that particular element for us. And now my next step is then to go in and update this particular element and either configure it by adding potentially generic resources there, or I can go directly into the engagement itself and create the assignment there. So let's do that. Let's create a new assignment. In this particular case, I'm not sure who we're going to leverage yet, so I'm going to provide a generic resource. And let's specify our start date of June 1st for 30 days on through into the end of August. So remember all the while that this particular assignment and the element itself is still not firm. If we go back and look at the scope of our engagement, we see that that report development element is, again, not firm. We'll need to go back to our opportunity and actually win that opportunity. And by doing that, by moving it to a closed won state, probability is increased to 100%, and we save this. And once we've closed won the opportunity, coming back to the engagement and refreshing it, we'll see that the change element itself is now firm, and we can begin the process of staffing it, in this case, since we have a generic resource, or activating it to begin capturing time and expense. So in this second scenario, we demonstrated the creation of a new change element that was effective with winning of an associated opportunity. We wanted to make sure that the effort to begin once we actually won the additional work from the customer. With that, I'll hand back over to you, Jerry, to manage the Q&A portion of our webinar.
Thank you, Mike. As you have seen, Kimble has heard your calls for enhancements in change management and has taken action. Our model for change management is very flexible. We understand that there is no one-size-fits-all approach for change management. Every scope change is unique, and the way each one of your organization handles these are also unique. Kimble offers a change management workflow that, in combination with a strategy that is suited to your business needs, will empower your users to handle any scope change in an intelligent, insightful, and forward-looking manner. So we actually have a couple of minutes left to start the Q&A sessions and answer some of the questions that you have given us during this session. Again, There's still enough time, so please don't hesitate to post those questions in the question box in the GoToWebinar console, and Mike and I will do our best to answer those now. We already have a couple of questions in. Let me see. What if the change requires multiple delivery elements rather than just one? Mike, do you have a good answer for that one?
Sure. So depending upon the specific need and actually your Kimble configuration, you can either add multiple elements and link them together to the same change order, or you could actually create a new change order from the engagement itself rather than just one of the elements. When you do this, you'll be selecting from one of the predefined product groups for your Kimble org, and then doing so will create an element for each of the products identified in that product group. So in that case can be a quick means of creating multiple elements to match the scenario.
Thank you, Mike. Let me see another question. If we've created a change order that's tied to winning an opportunity, is there a way to start by working at risk? Question mark.
Yeah, absolutely. So just as you would with any other opportunity and engagement within Kimble that has not yet been won, change order functionality in Kimble allows you to begin working on a change element by marking it or flagging it as working at risk so that you can begin working and capturing time and expense against it. So long answer to yes.
Okay, excellent. Let me see. The final question for now, and I think that's a very relevant question to looking at change and change orders. What reporting is available for change orders?
That's a good question. So we provide a number of out-of-the-box change order reports. One that provides an audit trail of change orders, and then another report that reflects the revenue associated with the change order. So obviously, both very useful reports, and given that you're in the Salesforce environment, you can either customize these reports or create new ones to meet whatever your reporting needs are.
Excellent. Okay. We have more questions, but we will get back to these questions to you personally, and we will capture those on our portal. Being aware of everybody's time, this is all that we have for today. Thank you, Mike, for taking us through the change process and showing us how powerful Kimble Change Management can be. And thank you, audience, for joining us today. Don't forget, again, each registered attendee will receive an email with instructions on how to access the recording of today's webinar, as well as responses to any of the questions that you've submitted. Again, thank you for those. If you'd like to see which topics we will be presenting in the coming months, or share a recording with one of your colleagues or friends, have your Kimble system administrator look this up at our portal and find the recordings and registration links. This concludes today's webinar. I want to thank everybody. Again, Mike, thank you, and see you next time.